You're listening to Systemic Era Podcast. The failure was designed.
America at the breaking point as Trump's issues warning voters can no longer ignore, based on an article by Tom Hartman. The fence is the point. A small summary, so we can get to the power. The Trump administration wants a permanent fence around Lafayette Square, with gates on Pennsylvania Avenue that can seal off the nation's most visible protest ground in minutes. The proposal lands in the middle of an election season and alongside a broader argument about oligarchy, repression, and who gets to keep the public outside the gate. Who is building distance from the public? This is not a landscaping dispute. It is a decision by the Trump administration to harden the symbolic front yard of executive power against the people it is supposed to answer to. Lafayette Square matters because it has always forced presidents to look at dissent, not just manage it from behind glass and steel. That is what makes the fence so revealing. Power is not merely trying to protect a building. It is trying to control visibility, proximity, and the physical terms of protest. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton is right to call out the permanent enclosure. Once the state decides that Americans should peer at democracy through barriers, it is already treating public assembly as a nuisance to be contained rather than a right to be tolerated. The administration's logic is fear, not order. The article's framing is blunt about the historical insult here. The same place where suffragists stood in the cold, and where peaceful protesters were beaten and gassed in 2020, is now being redesigned for faster lockdown. That is the political meaning of the fence. The state remembers protest not as a constitutional feature but as a security problem. The administration wants the architecture of emergency to become permanent. That matters because permanent fortification tells citizens exactly what officials expect from them: obedience, not accountability. Governments that trust the public do not build a panic room around the public square. They leave the square open and answer back. Oligarchy likes barriers. The article usefully ties the Lafayette Square plan to a broader governing style, elite rule that treats the public as an inconvenience and democracy as a variable to be managed. That is the right frame. Whether in Russia's mature oligarchy or in America's billionaire-funded version, the core move is the same: disconnect power from consent, then dress that disconnect up as stability. The source is strongest when it names the incentives directly. Billionaire money already buys influence through courts, parties, contracts, and pardons. When wealth can shape the legal system and the political system at once, a fence is never just a fence. It is a physical expression of a deeper deal. The public stays outside while insiders divide up the state. The article also gets one thing exactly right and should not soften it. The issue is not a few bad actors. It is the design of a system that rewards those who can buy access, buy deference, and buy insulation from consequences. The source is right to reject false balance. The piece does not waste time pretending that the parties pose symmetrical dangers. They do not. One side is openly leaning into authoritarian aesthetics, punitive state power, and the normalization of political enclosure. The other side, whatever its failures and timidity, remains the only institutional vehicle with any real chance of defending democratic space against that project. That does not mean Democrats deserve a pass. It means their failures have to be measured against the scale of the threat. Caution, donor dependence, and procedural cowardice are real problems. But they are not the same as a political project that treats protest as something to be fenced out, opposition as a security threat, and state power as property. The article is also right to note that ordinary voters still occasionally break through the machinery of money, as they did in the New York primary cited here. That is not a footnote. It is evidence that democratic politics still exists where candidates actually offer something other than managed decline. What the story actually reveals: Lafayette Square is not just about one fence. It is about a governing class that increasingly wants democracy without the public. That impulse shows up in fortified spaces, dark money, private capture of public institutions, and the fantasy that legitimacy can be replaced by insulation. The larger pattern is simple. When elites start planning for protest instead of persuasion, they are admitting that they no longer expect consent. When they build permanent barriers around symbolic civic space, they are telling you that the public is no longer the audience. It is the obstacle. That is the system here. Keep wealth concentrated, keep political power insulated, and keep citizens at a distance from the institutions that rule them. Lafayette Square is where that logic becomes visible and still. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Alternet for today's article. With the automated voice of Sam, thanks for listening.